Welcome to our continued coverage of the NHL Trade Deadline here on the fourth period, presented to you by CCM Hockey. DB, let's jump right into this. And a name that has been making the rounds lately, Jordan Eberle of the Seattle Kraken. Now, teams are still inquiring with Kraken GM Ron Francis about that, but my understanding is the Kraken would like to re-sign him. They have had conversations with his agent, Craig Oster, over at Newport. So far, nothing really to report. There hasn't been much progress there, but they're going to continue those conversations later this week as other teams poke around as well to see what the price tag may be and whether it's a team like Edmonton or Florida, Toronto. There are some other teams as well that have expressed some interest in Eberly, DB.
Yeah.
Where do you think might be a good fit?
Well, normally you wouldn't be concerned about trading a 13 goal scorer, Dave, until you look at the depth chart for Seattle and the lack of goal scoring on the team. They need to keep them because their goal production's been way down this year. McCann's still been good, but a lot of guys are underachieving. So I'd be more inclined to keep that player because of the lack of offense. But when you look at teams that might have a use for him, go back to a reunion in Edmonton on the right side. Connor Brown has been a failure, frankly, for Edmonton, so he'd look on the right side. I think any right-handed winger the LA Kings would be interested in because the Victor Arvidsson's injury, they don't have a lot of presence on the right side, so that could be a possibility. The other team I look at that might need help on the right side would be the Florida Panthers. I think he'd be a really nice fit. With his speed, his experience in the playoffs, I think that would be a nice fit. So I look at those three teams, not necessarily in that order, but three teams that could use Jordan Eberle in the trade market right now.
Well, another team that DB is also getting and generating a lot of interest, especially after their GM Kyle Dubas acknowledged to the media that he would like to get younger, is listening. And outside of the big boys in Pittsburgh, he's willing to listen on some of his other players. Now, aside from Jake Gensel, and that decision to me still, my understanding is that'll be made closer to the deadline. They've got 6 more games ahead of deadline day.
Mm-hmm.
When Dubas made his comments, they had 8. They're 2-0 from there. Let's see if they can build off that. But it's not really going to change things with respect to some of their other players. And some of the names making the rounds, we know of Riley Smith, but also Rickard Rakell, as I mentioned last week, Marcus Pettersson on the blue line with another year left on his contract. And we saw the reports over the weekend that, both Tristan Jarry and Alex Nedeljkovic are generating interest as well. There are a lot of different moving parts here. We know, as we said, they want to get younger. They want to add to this team. They're not going to sell off everybody. Some of these guys like Rakell, they've got some term on their contract. So it might take a little bit of creativity on both ends to make some of these moves work. But what should Pittsburgh be doing at this stage, DB?
Well, when you have guys like Riley Smith has got term left. He's got 1 more year left, and he's got a limited no trade cost. It's not going to be that easy in the next, less than 2 weeks to trade a player like that. Here's what I think they should do. I think they should maintain course. Keep this team together right now. And when or if you miss the playoffs, then you make your wholesale changes. I really don't see, other than Gensel, because I get it, he's unrestricted walk away. You get three great assets for him. You just can't quit on the season. It's the Pittsburgh Penguins, and the expectations were I go back to the beginning of the season, you traded for Erik Karlsson, who's got a $10 million cap hit. Now you're going to kind of retrench and rebuild and get younger. Like, at least see it through one season. Like, you never know what happens. I wouldn't trust a team in the playoffs anyway if they got their day, because their history since 18 has been terrible. But
Yeah.
I think you keep this team, other than Gensel, the rest of the guys that you want to move, it's not going to be easy moves. And it's going to cost you probably a lot of capital. So I would just wait and see how it finishes, and then have Dubas make his decisions on players more so in the offseason than right now before March 8th.
Yeah, and you mentioned 3 assets for Gensel. That seems to be the price tag right now. You're looking at a first-round pick, a top prospect, and an additional piece, depending how the others work out. And obviously, the equivalent value of a first versus another player, things like that, all come into play. But that's the parameters of what may happen there if they decide to move Gensel. But the initial feeling still is that they'll wait closer to the deadline. Shifting over to another team that they're basically chasing in the standings pretty much all year, the Carolina Hurricanes, who are second in the division at the moment. First of all, some house cleaning. We mentioned last week that Teuvo Teravainen's agent was going to be meeting with the brass in Carolina and Raleigh last week. That really hasn't changed anything. They did chat. Nothing new to report on that side either. He's a UFA at the end of the season. Brady Shea, and Brett Pesce all on expiring deals. Still, it seems like the plan will be to wait until the offseason to address those contracts. Outside of that, they're looking to move to add and to make some moves to add up front by the sounds of things. With Freddie Anderson coming back, goaltending seems to be set. Their decor they like. Maybe it's a depth piece that they add. But they want to add a little bit of scoring, DB, and this has been their whole thing. Like going back to last season, they lost out on Svechnikov. He got
Yeah.
hurt. There was nobody else there to supplement that offense. They'd like to remedy that this season. But we know they don't pay a hefty price for rentals. So where do you think they could go here?
I think the only guy that kind of makes sense would be Tarasenko out of Ottawa. And I agree with you. I don't think they're going to swing big. But, Dave, I know that the Svechnikov injury was really impactful. But when you look at this team's depth, they have double-digit scorings on their bottom six. Like, they could use one more winger, but that's it. Like, look, I picked this team to win the Cup, so I'll be totally transparent. Even if they didn't make an ad, I think they're better offensively this year than last year. And I get it. They missed one player, but you're talking about, you look at their depth chart right now. There's 12 forwards. 10 are double-digit goal scorers, right? And that's something that very few teams have that you probably need. And the great thing about it is, Aho's a star, and Svechnikov we know. Although, Dave, you look at his season, he's got 12 goals in 37 games. I assume he's better in the playoffs. But this is a situation where if you did shut down their top line, in quotes, their bottom nine could beat you. So I think Tarasenko will make a nice ad. But other than that, I think they're ready to go to war. I think they're ready to knock the Florida Panthers off the throne of the Eastern Division Eastern Conference champions last year. So I wouldn't be too nervous if I was a Canes fan if they didn't go get somebody. But that would be the type of player who can certainly bring offense and won't be that expensive since he is his cap hit isn't that big and the return wouldn't be that good. It wouldn't certainly be a Jordan. It wouldn't be a Gensel return.
Right. Yeah, they're looking for a second round pick plus for Tarasenko out of Ottawa. We'll see kind of how that unfolds. And another team sticking in the Eastern Conference, the Tampa Bay Lightning, they're making their rounds and they're exploring and they're evaluating their options. They've got cap space, but my understanding is they're looking for some players that have a little bit of longevity on their contracts, some term extra. It doesn't take them out of any of the races at the moment, but they're exploring like a potential for a David Savard reunion from the Montreal Canadiens. We mentioned Pettersson in Pittsburgh. He's got a year left on his contract as well. There are some other options that could be available as they look to see who they could potentially add to this mix because of that extra cap space that they've got. What's a good fit there?
Defense.
Yeah.
But Dave, even if they added a Savard, okay, they're the seventh worst defensive team in the league this year. Yeah. And that's because none of the goaltenders, even the big cat, a future Hall of Famer, is under 900 save percentage. So unless they start getting saves, it doesn't matter who you add on defense. And the tough thing is that I mentioned the seventh worst defensive team in the league, right? Yet they're a +5. They're scoring goals. They don't need help up front, right? I mean, they're scoring goals. They cannot keep the puck out of the net, and that's the challenge. So yes, you could add on defense, but unless Vasi goes off on a run that we've seen before, they might get in, they might miss. If they get in, I think they're winning out because they're going to give up too many goals. So again, the defensive side of the puck is where they need help, but they could certainly use more saves down the stretch too.
Yeah, defense definitely plays a factor in the goaltending as well, especially if you ask like Shane Kelly would probably go all over you for not mentioning that the D definitely plays a factor here, and the goaltending is a repercussion of that. But you're right. They need to add on that back end. They need to add, realistically, maybe two pieces on that blue line. We'll see what happens from the Tampa Bay Lightning. Before we wrap things up, a little bit of mentioning as well. We talked about the Global Series a couple of weeks ago. We should also mention that the Montreal Canadiens are poised to go to Paris by the looks of things in 2025. So not this coming year, the following year in October of 2025. It looks like the Canadiens, the NHL is still working on things to get the Habs over there in Paris in 25. And I believe Stockholm will be the other Global Series host at that point. So we'll see.
I'm booking my tickets for both those, Dave. So hopefully you have the good intel on that.
We'll be there for sure. That'll be definite. Speaking of intel, I will address this. As I mentioned last week, I tried to be subtle about it. But the Elias Pettersson situation in Vancouver, look, I trust my source. He is someone who very much would know about this situation. $12 million AAV on the table for Petey. Look, this isn't anything negative. I wasn't trying to put out anything negative to the situation, just reinforcing the fact that his focus is on winning and keeping things going. The offer's there if he wants to take it. Now, I was told long-term, I believe 8 We'll see where that goes, but it's on the table. That's the situation that's going on in Vancouver. We'll follow the rest of this as the trade deadline continues. Our coverage presented by CCM Hockey will be here on the fourth period all week long.